Hello again everybody, this is Amorgin and you're very welcome back to another episode of Founder Server Shenanigans, guys. And this footage is going back a couple of weeks. There's been so much going on with the swarm and all that kind of stuff. The different events that have been there, the new Galaxy tree, all that kind of stuff. So I was taking my time getting this to you guys. It was a big raid that was going down. I didn't catch the full thing, but the homeboys had turned out and they were raiding Borg Drone in this instance. Borg Drone was caught with his shields down, sitting on decent enough resources, enough to attract all of the guys to come out. Some ex-Hom turned out, chancing their arm there as well. We can see Sullus from Bomb in the middle. I'm going to come to a little bit on Bomb in a wee second, guys, but I want to pay a bit of attention to the tactics that are being employed here in such a raid. We'll take a look at that now in a wee second. So guys, much of what you're going to see going on the screen here is a raid on Borg Drone. He's been kicked from his alliance and the guys are feeding on him. Harry's draining him. He's gotten quite close in his base there. I'll pop over with my base at some point and you can keep an eye on the tactics that are going on here. You'll notice, guys, that there's a lot of realtors sitting out there, a lot of small ships sitting out. And a bunch of people trying to get their miners or faction miners and whatever, their horizons in on the Borg Drone's base to take out the resources he's sitting on. No small amount of resources, worth the Hom guys rallying and turning out here. It's a good turnout from the Hom lads, but I have to say, credit to Harry here, a little bit of credit I suppose to Corbin and that as well. What we're looking at here, guys, is one of the most effective base defences that I have seen by a small group of players. Whilst that group of players are raiding the base themselves. It's not an easy thing to do, guys. It's not an easy thing to try to defend the base and at the same time drain it. Especially when there's only really one or two protagonists that are doing that. One or two there for backup. I think in total we see maybe 3 ROG in action here. We have Corbin Aurelian there. I may as well call him ROG because him and Harry go way back. ROG and RPH are well known to be in cahoots with each other. The bottom line here is that Corbin and Harry, they've always been good buddies. They've always operated together. They've always made a decent team. And you'll note that all of these small low-level ships that are in what I would call here the transit zone, the area between the destination base and your home base, all of these ships are packed in here nice and tightly, guys, because this is making life difficult for anybody who wants to target anywhere in that area when Harry's moving his miner back and forth. And likewise for anybody else that wants to try and get their ship in there. It's making life very, very difficult to target and try to take out that ship, and especially when the period of transit and the space in between is so close together, it's practically impossible. This is a well executed base defense, and I suggest you take a close look at Harry's tactics here, because he takes out a fair number of ships, my own included. He's doing that as well as draining this base, so all credit to Harry. I want to come to another thing. Harry's very good at exploiting the wee nuances in the game, and I want to come to another thing on that in terms of Founder Server Shenanigans very, very shortly, and the reason why we can have relative peace mining whilst at the same time doing base raids like this. A lot of you guys out there have repeatedly asked me for our experiences on the Founder server and how our mining agreements have gone and how we work things out, and I'm gonna explain a little bit about that as this base raid progresses, guys. But I want to come back to the idea of here what Harry was doing in terms of this. My base sitting up here in a bad location, putting it in there, relocating up to a bad location here, you'll see, and trying to get ships through that killing zone, that area of transit there that's full of all of those realtors and what have you, making life difficult to target. I have to pass right through that, and on the way I have to pass Harry's base. So Harry had great sport taking out a lot of my ships there. I was trying to record and do other things at the same time, trying to capture this bit of footage. I would have loved if this had happened at a more convenient time where I could have sat down with no distractions and really tried to focus on getting a few hits in on this base. A small amount of resources taken out of it, but probably offset then by the repairs there. So not a successful raid for me by any stretch of the imagination. Some of the other home guys there may have gotten something out of this, but I didn't get an awful lot out of it. But we'll crack on anyway. I want to get into a little bit about the founder server Shenanigans, where we're at, guys. It's been a wee while from I've done a video on where we're at on the founder server. So we've seen a lot of things happen here with the new events and things, as I mentioned. We've seen the new galaxy tree and all of that. There's a fear there from some of the guys in the founder server that the players that are up there, the whales on other servers would apply to this as well. The guys that are up very, very high level, that once they start paying out for prime officers and these other prime researchers, that'll just increase the gap between the elites and the guys like us who are trying to keep up, that are in or around the level 30 mark. We're trying to keep pace with some of these guys that are in the mid to high 30s, and the fear is that the gap is going to stretch, certainly here on the founder server, where the population has dropped over a period of time. We don't need a huge gap opening up between the players on this server if it can be helped, because there won't be anybody to play with. Raids like this may become a thing of the past in terms of players like me being able to hack it with the higher level guys. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. There are those of a school of thought that reckon that it won't really matter what the elites are doing, because they'll always open up that gap anyway, and there'll be that second tier of player or third tier of player that they'll all interact with each other. They'll all do the attacks on each other, and you'll basically punch at your own weight. So again, it'll be interesting to see how that works out. There's talk, guys, of server merges and the ability to transfer servers and things like that coming. That's going to be an interesting one too. I've made calls there in a recent video, the one with Panic and Keenzer, about how all servers should be brought into line with the founder server in terms of our refinery. This has been an ongoing thing for a long time, as many of you guys know, and they mentioned in that video about how they want to be able to make players progression faster. So I suggested that bring all the servers into line with us. Don't be this kind of stingy Scrooge kind of sort of attitude. Don't adopt that kind of attitude where it's like no, well, we're going to take it off the founder server now and bring the founder server into line with everybody else, and so we're left then in the same situation where we're scrambling around in the dirt to get some of the uncommon G3s and all of that kind of stuff. Now arguably the G3s are going to become a little bit easier to obtain once G4 becomes a thing, but they certainly need to start looking at something to make it available and more easier got for all of you people out there that are struggling with the uncommon G3s and all of that. Bringing it into line with the founder server. It's been live on our server for quite a while now. It hasn't given anybody a wild, unfair advantage or any of that. It hasn't allowed us to progress at wild, fast rates or anything. It's just made life a little bit easier for us. I'd love to see it brought in for the rest of you guys, and life being made a little bit easier for you guys too. So what I suggest, guys, is refer to that video, refer to my suggestion if you like, and spam tickets into Scopely, spam messages to Panic and to Keenzer and all the rest of it, and tell them that that's something that you want, and lobby away for that, and leave your comments below there as always, guys, to that effect, and we'll see what we can do in terms of pushing that forward. But where that becomes relevant for me, and the reason I'm rabbiting on about that, is because what happens if our server becomes available for merge? For example, what happens if the founder server becomes available for merge? Do a bunch of guys get dumped into the founder server? They'll be over the moon because they get the three refines that we've got, but then everybody else is left behind. So does that leave the founder server as this kind of elite place that only certain people will be able to transfer into it, or only certain servers will be chosen to merge with us and things like that? I can see chaos ensuing if one server got to merge with us and another didn't, and they felt like they should have, and that they're strong enough to hack it with us and all of that. So that's certainly an interesting one. There's been other speculation out there, guys, in terms of the ships that are coming. We've done videos on that. Go back and check some of them out. Go and check Econ's videos. He's done a bit of speculation on this kind of stuff as well. And us on the founder server, we've seen a lot of the different incarnations of this game. We've seen a lot of stuff tested in this server. And we're all down there now with you guys, bar the little bit of an advantage that we seem to have with the G3 refining. A lot of servers have caught up in terms of strength with us and that. All this new content that's come out there, people seem to be enjoying it reasonably well. It's nice to have stuff to work on and to research, and the daily goals have been improved, and I'm certainly personally I'm enjoying them. I know the swarm aren't perfect for everybody, like I've mentioned in other videos. Where I'm at on the progression curve, the level 28, 29, working on one ship. I've worked a lot on my Centurion and put a lot of effort into making it as strong as I possibly can, and that's working out for me at my point in the progression curve in terms of being able to farm the level 30 swarms and complete the dailies. Maybe a bit of tweaking's needed on that, but it's certainly working for me at the moment, so I'm not in a hurry to hit level 30 just yet while I try to get the most out of that. But I said I'd come back to Harry here, guys. You've been looking at a lot of the footage there and hopefully picking up on all the wee nuanced stuff that's going on in terms of how this base has been defended. I want to come back to a wee thing we've been discussing on the founder server literally there today, but it's been brought up a number of different times, and we have done the whole writing out mining agreements. I've shared some of that with you guys on other servers in terms of the text of what our mining agreements would have been, and that was alright for a while. That was done in the first year, 18 months that all the guys in the founder server would have been playing together. But of late, wars have happened and bitterness has happened, and then the server's gotten smaller and people have become a lot more intimate, and arguably from that people's sensitivities get a bit more heightened and stuff like that, and it can be a tentative enough place to exist within the game at times. But largely people seem to be able to get on with each other. We've had our fair share of toxic elements that we don't see that happen so much anymore. So people are out there, they're battling with each other, and sure enough there's still old vendettas and old grudges there held by some, but it's not spilling over into toxicity and bitterness, because we've come up with an arrangement there that others have been critical about, others are interested and would support the idea, but it's working for us. A lot of people I'm sure on the founder server would agree. Leave your comments below, guys, if you come from the founder server and you have a specific thought on this. Hit me up on Discord surely and we can chat about it further. But my sense of it certainly is that for quite a while now we've been working with this rules of engagement that are very loose. They're not written down as such. They've largely been agreed through discussion and mediation on various different Discords, where leaders of the alliances and other senior figures in the alliance and personalities on the server have all weighed in and given their opinions on how they feel this agreement that we've got should work. And really through that a couple of fundamentals were agreed. So essentially, and I've mentioned some of this before, but essentially any warship in open space is fair game. This is my understanding of it. So any warship in open space is fair game. This isn't written down, remember, so it's quite loose, right? The second thing there is any base, if their shields drop, is fair game. You can raid any base that you want. It doesn't create an all-out war, but miners don't get touched. Right? Now, it's dangerous to have miners overprotect the limit and all of that kind of stuff, but we don't touch miners while they're mining. However, because we never agreed about the status of miners on in transit to a base or a miner that's involved in a raid like you're seeing here, people started, particularly a couple of ROG from what I remember, basically said, well, hold on a second, if you're raiding a base, you should be allowed to hit it. You should be allowed to hit the miner and attack that miner. And certainly in a situation where you're defending the base, of course that would make sense. So it kind of became accepted that if somebody was caught out raiding a base and using a warship, using a miner as a warship, then that miner is fair game. But while it's sitting on a mine or it's in transit to and from a mine, it's left alone. And that's seemingly the way it was working for a long time, and thank you to Borg. Borg have stayed kind of independent from the two main blocks that had always been there with ROG and Hum. Borg are now a third block that are there, and they generally they're a mixture of everybody else, and Borg sit there, and Borg made a comment there today about how if a miner is operating like a warship, it's fair game, and that's fair enough. Again, it's very loose, it can be exploited. and we're working in good faith under some sort of gentleman's agreement that it won't be exploited, but you'll always get those characters that are clever and they'll chance their arm and push the boundaries, and sometimes it'll work. So in this instance, and I'm referring to Harry here, Harry came up with a good one. It challenged me in terms of what was acceptable, and what that was is that one of the guys in Hom had complained about one of his miners en route back to his base. Harry was laying in wait, and Harry attacked his miner. Harry admitted that he was guessing from the cargo that was being carried that it had come from a base drain. So we hit the miner, and of course a discussion ensued then around was that a legitimate hit, and Rog came out officially and said, well, it's a legitimate hit because he was coming from a base raid. Now my query with that would have been, well, if he's coming from a base raid but you're only guessing that he's coming from a base raid, how do you prove that? So it's a little bit below the belt in terms of exploiting something that hasn't been ironed out. It is possible, although highly unlikely, granted. Absolutely, the extreme likelihood is that the guy was coming back from base raid, but once you're employing guesswork, where do you draw the line? If there's a marginal amount of resources where you're going, that could have come from a base raid, but maybe a guy's been sitting off mining titanium for the last 3 days somewhere and hasn't been touched, and he's coming back with 200k titanium. 200k titanium coming back in a horizon. I'm thinking to myself, that could be coming from a base raid, and I hit that, but that could easily have been a guy who was innocently out mining for 3 or 4 days in his horizon. So there are too many grey areas with that. I don't accept for 1 second that Harry's hit on the Hom guy was legitimate. But if what we're saying is that it looks like it, and we make the call, and you can sit outside somebody's base, then camping bases becomes a thing, and we start hitting miners in transit on the way home, and we have to dispute then all of the different little nuanced things around how much cargo was he carrying, what is the limit of cargo, do we set a certain limit of cargo? If you're carrying this much back, you're allowed to be hit. If you're carrying under this much, you're not allowed to be hit. So it starts to get complicated, and it starts to unravel once people start challenging the boundaries and start challenging the looseness of the agreement and exploiting the looseness of the agreement. So that's my thoughts on it there. I mean, on the one hand, it's a credit to Harry for being able to go out and do this kind of stuff, like I said earlier, exploiting the wee nuances of the game is something that he seems to be very, very good at, as well as being a skilled player in terms of his dexterity and all of that. But I don't accept that those things are helpful in the sense of maintaining what for us has been a really, really good agreement. Now, there is a caveat to this in the sense that Bomb are an alliance out there. I suppose they're a mid-range alliance. Their heaviest hitter is a guy who would have been probably second tier, top 10 maybe in that vicinity in Hom, and that's Sullus. And a wee shout out to Sullus. You might have seen him in some of the footage here. But Sullus joined Bomb, so he was mainly their heaviest hitter. Everybody else in Bomb would be my strength or lower, more or less, and they can't go toe to toe with a big alliance like ours in terms of hitting our bases and stuff like this here. So they've decided to go by pirate rules, I suppose. They're going out by, arguably by some, it could be pest rules, where it's just miners they're going to hit and nothing else. So they have been harassing Hom miners at every turn. It is an inconvenience, there's no question about it, but it hasn't stopped us. Like, essentially what's happened for me, I lose a couple of envoys in a day, cost me maybe 20,000-30,000 tritanium, but in the time that happens, I'm probably bringing back something like 50-60 G3 ore or G3 crystal or whatever it might be. So a fair trade-off when you're looking for G3 resources. I can live with that. There's a lot of my thoughts on what's going on the Founder server at the moment, guys. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what's going on in terms of mining agreements, the difficulties that you run into when you are trying to iron out some of your difficulties, and when people are exploiting the whole thing. So it would be nice to come up with an ideal arrangement, rules of engagement, but it's not always possible. So there it is, and I'm going to leave you with those thoughts, and if you just want to get back to me, come in the Discord and we can discuss further. I don't see an answer for this yet. I don't want to see our server go back into all-out conflict, but if people keep allowing things to escalate and it degenerates, then so we know the way that goes. This thing always goes round in circles anyway. There's war and then there's peace and then there's war and then there's peace. So maybe it's time for another war, maybe it's time for another bloodletting. We'll see how that goes, but in the meantime, guys, I'm going to sign off. You all look after yourselves and look after each other, of course, and I will catch you all again in a future video. Cheers.